Hi there, I'm John from CNCRI.com, and today we're going to discuss a couple of different options when it comes specifically to wood signage. When it comes specifically to wood signage, there's actually quite a lot of options when it comes down to it. The number one thing that people have questions about when it comes to signage is how dark the engraving is if we're using our laser over a CNC router, and how detailed and how precise are the results. Here we have two options. We have MDF with my logo, and it has a nice smoky look to it. That's on purpose, so I didn't sand it or mask it. And here we have exactly the same logo, almost the same size, except this one here is on bamboo, and it doesn't have a smoky look. So when it comes specifically to wood, we have that option. Do you want a smoky sign or do you want a nice clean sign? Now the difference is when it's laser engraved specifically, you'll notice that they're almost identical regarding sharpness. The only difference is we have a bit of a smoke going around the letters, and that's achieved two ways. One, we get a nice clean surface of it by masking it, and if we don't happen to mask it, we get it also by sanding the surface of the wood itself. Now when it comes specifically to MDF, which is masonite or hardboard, we also have an option with the laser to actually create carvings into it. Now here's an example. It's not the same sign, but it gives you an idea. And it might be a little bit hard to see, but we can technically do the same contrast you see here on the sign itself here. But we can also do dimensional kind of work. So you can actually have a little bit of a curve going up and down whenever we do laser engraving on the signage. So if I wanted to create a lot more contrast on this here, I could totally do that, no problem at all. Now that also applies to other kinds of wood, but it's not as clean a result. regarding the carving of it using the laser. And the biggest reason for that is because other kind of wood has grain and has other issues with density, while MDF masonite or hardboard is basically very, very consistent, which is why it's actually used a lot for custom cabinetry, which we also do in the shop, because you're not going to have any headaches. You'll go through 100 or 1,000 sheets of MDF and they'll be almost all identical density wise and characteristics, so you won't have the rotting, and you won't have little nails stuck in it from the ancient times. Now, the one nice thing about MDF is that it has no grain. That's why it's so consistent. It's actually a man-made product using basically a lot of wood dust or sawdust, lots of glue, heat, compression, and so forth. But when it comes to real wood, like what you see behind me here, we actually have variations in the grain, variations in the texture, variations in the density. So we'll take a look at this pine here. And pine is a really good material to work with for signage and a lot of other purposes here in the shop. And the nice thing about it is it doesn't weigh very much. This here is bamboo, and it literally weighs about 3 times more than this. Now, pine is very easy on machinery as well. We can bandsaw, we can router it, we can laser it. It's a really nice material. But something that pine does have is variations in color. Now, it's just the way bamboo works. Bamboo is very consistent, a little bit like MDF. We get the same resolution regardless of the wood species. But because pine is a lot less dense of a wood, we do have sometimes some issues with some knots in exactly the wrong spot that you never want them to be. Variations in color again, texture, and also variations in density. Sometimes we go through a slab of pine and then we find a little bit of dry rot in some areas. So that's something to keep in mind when it comes to custom signage. What you generally want to do is go with a hardwood, because it does create a lot more weight to it, but also a lot more strength. And especially if you have something that's going outside through the 4 seasons, if you have 4 seasons where you are now. Pine is a really nice material, but go with something that's a little bit harder, like oak, ash, and so forth. see from the one end of the spectrum to the other, you have masonite, MDF, hardboard, whatever you want to call it. And at the other end, you have true live edge kiln dried wood. Now here's a piece of ash that I happen to have flattened today. Just to give you an idea. So again, live edge, you got the bark, which will eventually come off. So generally for signage, we actually remove it for you. And you'll notice on the inside, you actually see little holes. Now those can be from worms, or they can be actually old rusted out nails. And we tend to find them with our CNC router. This is ash. This is incredibly heavy. It's probably about 20 pounds at least. And it's not really that big. But this would be wonderful for use outdoors, so like a cottage sign or a house number sign. It's nice and thick as well, as you can tell. But you always have a good side and you have a not so good side. Here we have a huge knot. So that's something to keep in mind when it comes to making custom wooden signage. Do you want to have knots or not knots? If you don't want any knots, well then we have to go with generally specific species depending on the size of the sign. So if you're looking for custom wooden signs, any species, any kind of wood, either man-made or straight from the forest or the kiln, and then we got to flatten with our CNC router. Contact me at CNCRI.com and we'll make it for you.